And especially after 9/11, the other gets characterized as, you know, the Muslims and these other folks who are really, really, those are the people we're going after with all of these laws. So y'all in here, you don't have to be worried, right? But slowly it's crept, right, into the just the day-to-day stuff around the drones in the US, et cetera, et cetera. I also want to point out something else around, you know, the government has been assassinating people on American soil, American citizens for a while. You know, just under the covertness of the FBI and the CIA and all of these. So that's been going on. So sometimes when I hear people talking about this as though it's new, I think it does a disservice, right, to us. We need to connect it to what's been going on and see the escalation of it and make those connections for people who wouldn't regularly see themselves as implicated. Right? Because if it's going after the Pakistani young person who may or may not be, quote, a terrorist, but you don't see that as connected to what happened to Fred Hampton right here in Chicago, then you shrug your shoulders. It's just some Pakistani kid that's getting blown up for maybe they're a terrorist, right? It doesn't feel the same, but we're all connected to that, you know, because they've done that to people here who look like you. So I think that part of what we're doing right now, and when we don't look at this apparatus that's being, like, that exists currently and that keeps getting built, I think I saw some study that said like 10 million, I don't know, not 10 million, but millions of people have like high security clearance or something within the government. What is that about? You know, and who are these people? And, you know, how is this really working? And so I think we have to just kind of like, you know, sometimes we get so stuck on the one person, and I get it, you know, like we have to, but he's gonna be gone in 3 years, and we're still gonna have these laws and the CIA and all of these institutions that are really holding all of this stuff. So we have to be outraged. I think that's true, and I think we do use him as like a way to think about that maybe, but he, you know, it's bigger than him. And I think that's super important, and it will outlast him. And I think we really do need to be thinking that way.
And sorry, we know we're talking about and I totally agree. It's not to be stuck on the one person, but you know, sometimes it's like, what's the difference between having dreams and having visions, right? And so, you know, for people who campaigned and wrote checks, absolutely, right, that this was part of the I have a dream, and it's again not to be stuck on the one person, but to ask, so what do we dream now about? You know, no, really, what, you know, do we have dreams? Do we have visions? What do we envision as a future and as a democracy and a society that we would want to live in? And so much of our language has been co-opted by both the corporations and commercials, but also the state's ongoing commercials. And you're right, every 4 years it changes and it stays the same. But I'm really curious, like, what are our visions? And I think this actually brings us back to contemporary political prisoners, that if you read the people who are still inside, the way they do theory is different, I believe, from the way most of us, or just include myself, do theory from the outside. Like the way Angela thought when she was writing in the early 1970s from a jail cell, and the way she thought about life and love and rebellion is different. Right? And so the way Mumia writes and what he says about the black petty bourgeoisie, which is pretty right in your face, is different from, you know, what I'm gonna say sitting right here, even though I might think it, right? And this, I think, is why we definitely have to support political prisoners. So as Jericho, you know, asked, what's the difference from the trajectory that Malcolm X and Martin left us in the 1960s and the trajectory that we follow today? But I would argue that Russell Maroon Schultz, that Mumia, that, you know, Asada from Cuba, they have visions, where most of us may just have dreams that are fairly reduced or diminished by what we think is possible within what we see and consume.
We are running short on time, but I want to allow maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. There are supposed to be mics. Oh, there are mics. So if you could come to a mic, maybe come down to the landing here, if you can get there, or...
Thank you, everyone on the panel. I'm just curious about everyone on the panel and your thoughts about two other women from the Black Power era that, in my opinion, there's a lot to learn from their activism and their work and their experiences, Elaine Brown and Kathleen Cleaver. Two women that I think, if you look into like their experiences, their history, there's very profound things to take from their experiences and their activism and their work, after, the 70s and so on.
I believe that Kathleen wrote the foreword to, I'm sorry, I can't remember everything, to either one of Mumia's most recent books or has assisted with his case, as has Angela. Angela is actually featured in Long Distance Revolutionary. That Kathleen Cleaver is probably one of a handful of people who has consistently spoken out and advocated in behalf of political prisoners, particularly Black political prisoners, and attempted to work on getting clemency. I think, yes, Elaine Brown has made contributions. I think there are contradictions that appear obviously in her autobiography. I do know that a couple years ago when there was a prison uprising in the South, that she was actually a key spokesperson trying to advocate for the incarcerated. And they had mobilized by cell phones, right? So they're savvy about technology. They bribed guards, they got cell phones, they called each other in different prisons, and they started a non-violent, but a peaceful strike, just a strike from work, a strike from protocol, a strike from routine. And the repression that followed that resistance, right, became something that Elaine Brown helped to publicize or bring to the public's attention.
How you doing there? I thought the film was really great, and you panelists, you're very brilliant, and I'm glad you're here. Have a comment and have a question for y'all. Ms. James, I think you mentioned something. You hinted on something that is my own particular, I don't know, I guess you can say it's part of my profession. It's imagery and things that are sort of related to it. I don't think that Miss, Davis could have been anything other than an icon, given the circumstances and given her own particular background, her looks. Miss Davis had a stack of things about her that my friends in PR would kill to, to present to the world. Even though she was you could tell she was very, very, really serious about what she was doing. She always came off very, very communicative and very soft. She never came off as being a person that you would step into a room and she would chop your head off. She didn't come off like a lot of the other Black Panther people would come off. And I think that probably had a hell of a lot to do with how popular she was and quite possibly with how successful she was. It's my opinion that a dark-skinned Black man in her same position, going through what she went through before that court, before that jury, I doubt very highly that it would have came out in his favor. And I want to know what you all say about that.
Interesting. I have to think about that a while.
So we all know, because we have savvy, that there's degrees of embraceable Blackness, right? And part of it is just the throw of the universe, like how you're physically born, what class you're born into, access to certain types of education, and how you use that embraceable Blackness to articulate, you know, a program for liberation obviously becomes the most central. You know, you're right. And the most pressing example that we know of, we've mentioned, is Ruchell Magee, right? That he's inside for 40 some odd years. Actually, his writings appear on the Harriet Tubman Literary Circle, so one way to expand the embrace, right, is to circulate the writings, to be able to talk about the stories and the narratives. But you also could focus on the Black female body, and that would be the Move women, right? So that Ramona Africa is out. She survived the bombing, she's out. But there were 9 Move people who were incarcerated, and they included a number of women. Unfortunately, I can't remember. About roughly half rural Africa, the women involved, one died from breast cancer already, incarcerated, but having the wrong kind of hair, you know, meaning dreadlocks that are not groomed in a salon, having a speech that doesn't follow academic pattern, having a poverty that's definitely removed from the middle class, having an affinity for a quote, it's not a cult, but it gets described as, I mean, so the lack of respectability to a certain kind of Blackness will allow you, as Frank Wilderson has written elsewhere about civil society, it will allow you to magnetize a bullet faster than bodies that appear to have been domesticated just because they appear a certain way, right? And okay, you know, our proximity to loving ourselves is going to be shaped, I think, and this is what I got from Mumia, which I love, he combines the two, love and rage, right? That we would reclaim the ways in which our bodies are distorted, and also what you said about protection. And we would be able to say we will forego the insurance policy of being loyal to certain kind of structures that work against us. But you know, we're complicated. We're complicated, we've been made complicated for centuries. And I think the beauty of it, even though you're absolutely right in what you said, the beauty of it would be the ability to understand a human shield or some kind of protection for all bodies that magnetize aggression just because they exist and they want to be free.
I would add to this. I think I've been thinking about this a lot, about, you know, what kind of makes for certain things to hit and what misses, right? And I think about the, you know, New York 21, you know, trial where Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, was in that, you know, crew of folks in New York that were basically framed, Black Panthers who were framed for something that they didn't do, that turned into a huge mass movement as well of folks who were not international, but definitely national. And they were able to, you know, successfully be acquitted of the charges. And if, you know, Afeni Shakur certainly was not, you know, didn't look like Angela Davis. But I think what we can't miss, as I mentioned early on, was that there was organizing that was happening. That it made, the organizing and the fact that so many people got involved in the Angela Davis case made it possible for that white farmer to feel like it was okay for him to identify with Angela Davis. It gave him some permission to do that, because, you know, it doesn't make sense otherwise. You know, it's like kind of like things happen and people get on bandwagons, and there is a bandwagoning effect, and that happens because of initial organizing that becomes more and more successful. And I think about that a lot, you know, but why certain things actually make more people feel like they can empathize. And I think everything that, you know, Dr. James says about all of those things about the body and the image are really part of it, a huge part of it. And there's also those moments when organizing allows you to kind of overcome some of that for about a minute, you know? So I'm really interested in that and how those things happen. And so, yeah, if you can sell the person, then maybe that allows more people to be able to think that it's somebody worthwhile. But I want to